You're listening to Out of the Box, a place for marketers to get inspired, get going, and break out of the box.
Welcome to Out of the Box. I'm Dan Feldstein, Director of Marketing at IronSource, and this week we're fortunate to speak to a duo of powerhouse marketers. Today we're speaking with Ashley Luong and Jack Ricciardi, who are on the account management team at leading independent digital agency 3Q. Thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Ashley and Jack, your teammates at 3Q, supporting growth for some very notable clients. It would be great to start if you could tell our listeners about a little bit about 3Q and then a bit about yourselves and how you found yourselves in your current roles.
Yeah, so I can take that one. So 3Q is a full service growth marketing agency. We're one of the largest independent digital marketing agencies. And we offer, a full suite of services with expertise in paid media, creative, SEO, decision sciences, and just, general digital strategy. And as far as how I, made my way here, to be quite frank, I didn't even really have a full understanding of what growth marketing, really was when I first started out at 3Q. But I knew that I was looking for something where, it would be sort of that balance between, creative and then also just tapping into, the analytical skills that I wanted to hone in on as well. And ultimately, I really just had a lot of opportunities to learn, and grow over the years that I've been here. So 3Q has been just absolutely, the perfect place for me to really kickstart my career.
Yeah, I think kind of off that note for me as well, Dan, just moving from, I finished up school about a year ago in 2019. I was fortunate enough to go to Northeastern and take advantage of their co-op program, which allows you to have 2 6-month internships full-time with various marketing companies and whoever's in your actual field. So I was fortunate enough to actually have 2 years of experience coming out of university. And particularly at my last opportunity, I had a chance to have an exit interview with my CMO and just talk about, at his age, very successful man, what would you do? What would you tell yourself at your age looking back now? Challenges, things like that. He came to me with this idea of a T-shaped marketer, which essentially just takes all the views of a full stack marketer, especially within digital marketing, having aspects of all those different areas, and then finding one that you really want to hone in on and be an expert in. So having that base knowledge and then finding one that you're really interested in, such as social media marketing or email marketing, and really pushing forward towards that. So my goal immediately coming out of that position was to just find a place, find a company that can really foster this base knowledge growth. I had some experience, a little bit social media marketing, a lot in email marketing, and just wanted to really broaden that approach more. And 3Q seemed like an amazing place to do so. They offer incredible trainings. The first month and a half, I would say you're really just on with trainings. You get a full grasp of search, of social media, a lot of different aspects. So 3Q was the ideal place for me to follow and pursue that goal further.
That's great. And I think we'll get into some of that. You tease some of that advice for younger marketers. I think we'll get into that later in the podcast. But just rounding out, are there specific types of clients that 3Q focuses on and that your team focuses on in particular?
Yeah, sure. So I can take this one. So specifically, we work with like a very large range of clients as a whole for our agency. This ranges from like large enterprise clients all the way down to like startups and smaller firms. Ashley and I specifically work on the mobile app marketing side for one of our largest enterprise clients.
And I guess one last question about 3Q generally is, what would you say sets 3Q apart from some of the other large established agencies in the marketplace?
A couple things here. So, I feel like a lot of companies, they will display some type of culture or like as being like something to really bring in people in recruiting. I think most places you get there, they have that foosball table no one ever uses. You do your walk around and it's just things that, the beanbag chairs, all that vibe, and no one uses it. It's not really their culture. It's just more of a facade. I would say that 3Q really empowers that a lot more. They have community initiatives. They have regular like regional things they do with their own offices, appointed people for cultures in those offices, but that actually drive it home on a regular basis. So I would say culture is a huge thing at 3Q, a lot more so than I've seen at other agencies and other organizations. And I would say also the client base really stands out. I mean, we've worked with some of Silicon Valley's like largest startups coming out, and also some of their more accomplished companies coming out of that region too.
Yeah,
Sounds
and
great.
I would also add that I hear of a lot of our clients being referrals from like existing clients of ours.
Mm-hmm.
So I think once we do sort of bring those clients in and really show them just the quality of the service that we're able to provide them, being strategic and really just dedicating ourselves, to their brand and to their marketing programs, the clients really recognize that, and through word of mouth, we're really able to grow our client base that way.
Sometimes the best clients are the ones that come from existing good clients,
Hmm.
right? For the meat and potatoes of our conversation today, I was really excited to talk to you both about what we're calling the dirty world of data and measurement. Always a timely topic. Uh, let's start. I guess we could start with the positive. When you're working with clients and they're getting started with running UA, um, or you're helping onboard a client that might already be running it but isn't running it optimally, what are the first things that clients need to do to get measurement set up correctly?
Yeah, I would say the first thing, especially when working with a client, overall with that relationship, it's alignment. You need to have consistent alignment. You really need to understand their goals and then find ways after that to offer suggestions. So I would say following that note, getting in order KPIs, these key performance, metrics, getting these together, aligning with your client on what that means to them, exactly what they want to drive conversion wise, and then assigning some type of LTV and overall value to what these conversions mean. Um, some of that can come, it can be more nitty or gritty, looking at different regional aspects, across different OSs, determining exactly what that very particular segment of user would be in value, or it might be a little more broad to the client. But all of this needs to be created as like a baseline before you even jump into looking at the data of UA. And then I would say following that, you want to set up some type of regular cadence and reporting automation that aligns these KPIs, these conversions, to the LTVs on a daily basis. Something that you can review alongside with your client, keep that alignment going, and also determine to them that you are in fact driving value for them. And I think Ashley can speak a little bit more to how that you integrate with an MMP and actually bring that reporting process to life.
Yeah, that the MMP is always the first thing that comes to my mind, when we're talking measurement. I would say, if you're just getting started with running UA, I mean, and first off, just, have an MMP. I am just a huge advocate for, having a single platform where you can aggregate cost, performance metrics, especially if you're looking at more like down funnel events and wanting to get sort of a full scope of what your program's looking like for analysis and whatnot. But building on top of that, I also think it's important to pick the right MMP for you and your team and your program, right? Because ultimately, the MMPs out there, they'll mostly achieve the same thing. They have similar capabilities. But what my approach to it is, think outside the box a little bit. Make sure to consider things like, what does the dedicated team slash resources on their end look like? Will they be very involved in partnering with you and working with you to ensure that things run smoothly? Or things such as, what does the usability of their dashboard look like? With the MMP relationship, I just feel that it's so important to make sure that you're thinking like big picture and thinking long term, because you do end up relying on that partnership so strongly when it comes to ensuring that you have a good measurement process in place.
That does certainly make sense. I think what I heard a lot of from both of you is that there are certain opportunities for things to maybe go wrong if they're not set up right from the start. So I was wondering again, where have you seen clients or other companies, mess up on setting up those LTVs from the beginning, or maybe, is there a horror story you can share about not working with the right MMP that might be kind of educational for listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I think just off of that note, one of the biggest mistakes that can be made early on, kind of teased on this too earlier, was just like this alignment with KPIs and LTVs. So it's not necessarily like how they're set up. It's usually on the client side when they do LTVs. Definitely agency and like different partnerships across our agency. We've built out LTV models for them. But usually you're dealing with an enterprise client, someone who's already very established. They already have these LTVs built in. So I would say the biggest thing there then is really aligning with your clients on what drives that value. And then also aligning with them a little bit more on like the intricacies of reporting logic that you might set up. This is where we've personally seen like some type of give and take, some type of discrepancies we've seen between our client is when they try to put together a source of truth, is what they like, quote unquote, source of truth. But just something that they're not as in tune with the way that we're looking at reporting. As we get more granular with campaigns and ad sets and even down to the ad level, there can be some intricacies along with reporting logic that would lead your client, if they were to pull a report from MMP, to potentially get data that's looking a little different from how yours would after data ingestion, after going through whatever reporting software you're using, such as Tableau. So I think aligning on exactly how you're filtering through their data, exactly how you're aligning conversions to these end LTVs is really important, and you'll avoid a lot of mistakes going forward with discrepancies between you and your client.
Yeah, Dan, as you mentioned, what I think what Jack and I are both really trying to hammer home here is to make sure you get the setup right, or as right as it can be at the beginning, because that ultimately will lead to less issues, less data discrepancies down the road. And from like an MMP perspective, as Jack mentioned, and as I had mentioned earlier as well, it is so important to have that MMP be your source of truth. But I think that a mistake that can be made on the client side sometimes is just not having a healthy level of skepticism, when it comes to your data, even if your MMP is your source of truth, and you want to just believe that the data is just accurate the way it is. I think it's very beneficial to just always have a little bit of a critical eye when it comes to your data, because things can go wrong, right? Technical issues arise. So just because you trust that the MMP can be your trustworthy source of truth when it comes to measurement for your program, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be questioning when data looks off, and just always sort of keeping on your feet, and be sure to think critically when it comes to the data that's being reported to you.
No, that's great. I think I've been in the industry for a while, and I've seen my own examples of horror stories where, like, you have a day where a partner doesn't report any data, or you know two parties have a discrepancy that seems completely wild. How do you, as a kind of trusted partner to your clients, and or internal clients or whatever, like, how do you navigate those conversation when something goes wrong?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to this one. In my beginning roles here at 3Q on this team, I was very close to the reporting side. It's a way that we just get like encompassed and like bring us up through the account, gets you really in the weeds and actually knowledgeable of it. So I would say one of the things that we've set up moving forward with this is, one, you need to make sure you get ahead of these issues, right? So you have to be in a sense that you're finding these first before the client does. That's always a bad look if the client is finding a data problem or some type of discrepancy that you yourself haven't noticed, and then you have to backtrail, take time to get back to them. That's never a good look, as we're meant to be thought leaders, right? They're hiring us to be these thought leaders. So I think one good point there is getting ahead of it, and one good way we've become a lot better at getting ahead of it was we had regular QA checks from each channel owner, looking into our main data source, making sure they on a daily basis this aligns correctly with our UI. It takes like a quick 5-10 minutes of your day. But even a step further than that, what we've gone to do is actually set up automated alerts within our data software that we're using. So our database, which would be Tableau right now. So we'll send actual email alerts to different channel owners and to the account as a whole, noting when something like weird is happening, like a 20% decrease in like activations for our app product, despite no changes being made on the platform. And just aligning with those owners to see exactly what would be alarming. And then that way, even though, data issues, like you said, Dan, they're going to happen, right? It's not avoidable necessarily, but as long as we can be ahead of it, get those alerts early on, and then you control the messaging and also can think of ways to move forward and then present that to the client, giving them an actionable response.
Diving into that, you alluded to the client really having a holistic view of understanding what to trust and having a little bit of skepticism when they look at some data. I wanted to ask, we know that some media partners are better at reporting data than others, or their accuracy might be better than others. How do you talk to your clients about weighing that reputation and developing that skepticism when they're making buying decisions?
I would say that is definitely that holds a lot of weight for us when we're making buying decisions. For me, just that reputational element surrounding what their reporting and data accuracy uh, capabilities are, it boils back down to transparency and how transparent this media partner is willing to be, in order to have that partnership. So when I say transparency, I mean, is the media partner willing to share publisher info with us? Can we get the exact name and bundle ID of the app that, this ad was served on, at this time? If they're, a DSP running on multiple inventory sources, are they willing to share the name of the exchanges, the exact exchanges that, we will be buying from, for our program? Some publishers, or rather some media partners, just are not as willing to do that. We've had some media partners be unable to or unwilling to share impression data at the publisher level, for instance. And things like that really just come up as red flags for us sometimes. It doesn't inherently mean that, anything sketchy or suspicious is going on, but we definitely err on the side of, transparency is key. And I think it's so impactful for building the trust in the relationship that we have with the media partner. So when it comes to prioritizing which media channels we want to actually work with and buy from, we definitely lean towards the ones that are willing to work with us and to be as transparent as they possibly can.
And that's a kind of a great lead into what I wanted to ask you next, which is, when you're looking at diversifying your portfolio of media partners and evaluating new partners or vetting them, what are some of those criteria? What does that process look like? What, besides transparency, is really important to you when you're looking to innovate around media partnerships?
Yeah, well, transparency, I would say, is definitely number one. But outside of that, one of the first things that I'm looking for when I'm doing my research or when I'm in these intro meetings with media partners for the first time, the first thing is just what is their value prop, right? What makes them unique? What can this media partner offer us that we don't already have? Um, Really looking to understand, what their product is really about. What's like the one thing that they, are driving home when it comes to their product, and if there is something unique, right? If there's something differentiating this media partner that is currently missing from our current media mix, that definitely sort of elevates them to like go to this next step of, okay, we're going to continue, talking to them. We're going to continue exploring this as an option. And outside of that, I think this might sound a little bit superficial, but I am a huge advocate for basing some of these decisions on just how genuinely likable are the people that you're going to work with. And what I mean by this is, I think it's hard to tell, obviously, like at the beginning stages in intro calls, in the intro stages and whatnot. But you can definitely pick up on things like, is their team just being, overly salesy? Are they trying to come across as, or rather, are they coming across as simply trying to sell you their product, or do they seem to be, authentically, dedicated to working with you, to growing the relationship with you and your brand? All in all, right? Like, we spend so many waking hours of our life at work, and I think it's really important to actually enjoy working with the people at work. And I think that this is something that ends up holding more weight in terms of like maintaining the strength and the healthiness of the relationship in the long term than people really think of, at the beginning, when they're just so focused on, what does this media partner's product look like? How can, they add value to my program? That's what gets you in the door, in my personal opinion. But really, it's developing, and fostering that relationship with the partner over time, that really leads to long-term success.
Absolutely, and I certainly couldn't agree more. I think from the other side and from other places I've been, it's abundantly clear that this is still a trust business, and many new entrants want to come in product first and really believe that they can win only by having a best in class product. And they lose sight of the fact that this is a ongoing relationships with partners for years and years, and that long term trust and partnership is essential to success. It's certainly something we value here, and it's great to hear that from the client side as well. On that note, I think product and there's a lot of sameness in tech and media, but can you share an example, even at a high level, about a win your team has had when you brought in a new media partner? Like, you brought someone unique in, and it wound up, having a significant impact on the success of the account.
Yeah, I mean, not to be biased here, because I know we are on an Iron Source podcast, but really the first one that came to mind for me was Iron Source Aura. Really, the entire concept of the out of the box experience, intelligent preloads, that has always been so interesting to me. There's not quite as many players in the space that offer a product like that, so the unique factor, the differentiator, that's already there. And I also think it's one that not many mobile app advertisers have tapped into or have even really explored tapping into. But for us, working with Aura, we did find success working with them, and it was just so cool to really be doing something different. Their product, and the way that our whole program with them worked really was just so different than all the other channels in our media mix, which were more just traditional, like ad networks or DSPs. So yeah, really awesome partnership with them. Definitely shout out to Wendy and Tony for being the awesome partners, right? That really made that relationship even more special.
Well, you can't see, but I'm blushing. Thank you for the kind words. I think at a high level, it is nice to have something that is differentiated and adding that into the mix instead of one, incrementally one more social network or one more DSP, right? Like, it just diversifies and finds new opportunities, I think, to connect with users. And Jack, I wanted to ask you a couple questions, kind of along the line of portfolio diversification. And that brings you challenges because every time you add something that is truly new, you need creative that works on that
Right.
channel. Can you talk a little bit about how you manage creative at scale?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the baseline things you have to do is really just take a look at all of the channels you're running on, and even like propose ones like you mentioned, like bringing on a new partner. Um, Baseline, you need a checklist of all the dimensions that are needed per each channel, and also per each placement available within that channel. Now, you may not want to run on every placement, but it's essential to have those dimensions breaking out just in case, something you want to test. Maybe that placement in the future gains a lot of traffic and becomes a lot more useful just in the industry as a whole. So something you want to be ready to capitalize on when that's available. And then I think also communicating these checklists to your client, as well as noting which dimensions can be interchangeable between channels. One thing that we've noticed, especially going down the creative process, although 3Q Digital has a very like full stacked creative team, very accomplished individuals, our specific client and a lot of enterprise clients will already have their own creative team that they want to work with. As amazing as that can be, there can be some bottlenecks. So understanding that some dimensions can be interchangeable between channels. Maybe if you're bottlenecked for creative, you can take some creative from one channel that has a similar placement dimension as something you're running on. For example, like Google UAC might have a similar placement size as or dimensional size as Facebook would. So just some quick notes that like could be really helpful in that process. I think another big thing, just moving off of placements, is understanding how your users are engaging with different placements within that creative. So using like, for example, within Google's UAC product, looking at like the difference between like using text ads and display ads within there. If you think about it with like text ads, or for example, let's say search versus display, right? So with search, your user, the way they're engaging with that product, they have a very high intent for what they want to do. They know exactly what they want, and you want to meet that with an ad that meets that messaging for high intent and drives them directly to exactly, whether it's a brand thing or conversion, exactly where you need them to be. However, if you're running like a basic display ad, you got to understand that your user's going to have limited intent, if not like any intent at all. So keeping that in mind, you're going to want something that's a lot more engaging, potentially something that's a little more educational if your brand isn't really well known or doesn't really have that reputation. So just different things to consider with that portfolio diversification as well, and bouncing off of placements a bit more. And I think one last thing as far as diversification of your portfolio, just noting which channels are influenced the most by influx of new creative and creative optimization. So, for example, some channels that might be a lot more text heavy, a lot more copy heavy, those ad fatigues may take like a lot less time. So it would make more sense for you to focus your effort on something that might have a lot more ad fatigue, for example, like static images on Facebook.
Got it. Is there like an example you could talk about? I think like, is there a specific campaign where you found that a certain approach to creative optimization really impacted the outcomes?
Yeah, sure thing. I think just as a baseline, it's really great to get a very granular level of detail for your creative data. I think one thing that has helped us out a lot is being able to standardize this granularity across all of your assets. What I mean by that is being able to pick apart your creative assets to have to look at things such as like messaging theme, CTAs, text overlay, even some more intricate stuff like text count or like the mix of keywords you're putting in that text overlay. Having access to that data and then being able to link that to back-end conversions and even more down funnel events is key in really enhancing your ability to do these optimizations. So bouncing off of that, one key thing that we did was with one of our Facebook ads. So just as a note here as well, we haven't seen like one particular ad that's really blown it away. You know what I mean? Something that's like increased performance dramatically. You can see that obviously, but it's definitely more of a rare occurrence when you already have like a pretty strong social campaign going. So you're more likely to see like these gradual increases in performance, even though they may be significant, but just nothing like that was like huge popping out. Like to answer your question, Dan. But so one example we can talk about implementing campaign and implementing these data insights was through something we had run through Facebook. So we had noticed that we had a broader audience, had broken that down into different segments depending on the user's activity within our app, as well as like the frequency of that activity. So you got daily users, weekly, monthly, breaking that a little more apart. And in doing so, and having this access to the creative granularity, we were able to see exactly which aspects of our creative assets were linking up differently across these segments. So based off of that, we could see top performing, like CTAs, for example, top performing keywords that resonate a lot more with different segments than they did with other segments of activity and frequency within that user base. So driving that, we were able to put together a new campaign very segmented towards these audience groups, really doubling down on the top performers there, as well as providing suggestions on what those top performers had within their creative mix and how our client can utilize the creative team to make similar assets and keep fluctuating those against the top performers. So that was something, again, where we didn't see like immediately off the bat, like 100% increase in conversion rate or something, but it was definitely like a gradual gain week over week and something that we contributed to that gradual gain.
That's great. I'm curious, do you find that you're able to transfer insights about what's working from between platforms, or have some of these channels become so mature that that the best practices, right, like the optimization at that word keyword level on Google, like can't even transfer that to Facebook anymore? What have you seen there?
Right. So that's kind of the interesting and kind of intriguing part of this too, Dan, and creative optimization. That's often I feel like a challenge in this industry as a whole, especially when you talk about portfolio diversification, right? Just trying to find those common insights with your user base. I think an important thing to recognize here, which I had slightly touched on earlier, but basically that your users are going to interact a lot differently between these products. So like someone on Facebook is going to act a lot differently than when they see a display ad coming from Google UAC. So there are some callouts you can make as far as like keyword mix. For example, you could link like the keywords you're using and trying to find which ones are resonating the most with your audience. You can link that to, for an example, text overlay on like your static Facebook assets. So maybe the text that's coming in on your static Facebook assets, you can align on those individual words and see what the groupings of those words and when, for example, if like free comes up the most or like, I don't know, whatever's an actionable thing for whatever product you're trying to push. Maybe that word in particular resonates a lot more across all of your channels and maybe might be something you want to introduce in copy or in text, like the static text and like the actual text overlay in a lot of your creative. So I think there are some key things you can pull apart that match across all channels, but also keeping the caveat that, users are going to interact and engage differently depending on what they're served and who they're served by.
That makes a lot of sense. So I would love to pull it back from that. This has been incredible. I think like the level of insight around some of these really detailed decisions is hopefully going to be really valuable to our listeners. And I'd love to kind of wrap it up by going back to that 30,000 foot view and say, certainly it's been a crazy year so far. We're only halfway into it. As you're helping clients navigate this new world, like what are some of the biggest trends you've seen emerge in the last 3 to 6 months?
I think saying it's been a crazy year is almost a little bit of an understatement at this point. But yeah, definitely crazy stuff going on in the world right now. I would say a big trend I've noticed is, obviously people are staying home a lot more often now. And we as human beings are social creatures by nature, right? So when that, physical restriction to, connecting with people and connecting with sort of the outside world is restricted, we naturally, push ourselves further towards like social digital outlets. So for me, what that means is, having an increased, user engagement across various social platforms and social channels, and really sort of reprioritizing ad spend towards those types of channels. One that comes to mind for me immediately is TikTok, which I have not personally tapped into as a user quite yet, but I know that it's been quite the trend amongst a range of age groups and demographics, honestly, especially in light of sort of the quarantine and the restrictions that have been implemented, across our country so far this year.
Yeah, and I think also touching on that actually made some great points. Another big part that we're seeing too is just this increased emphasis as a whole from users into more of this realm of virtue signaling. So Ashley touched on this, but just we're social creatures, and in a crazy time like this, we need to find ways to connect with people and ways to keep connecting with people. And I think a lot of people are taking the avenue of social media, which makes sense. And also just given the emphasis of like our socio-political situations, the different things that have been arising, it's been more important for individuals to virtue signal their intent and connection to these things. And I think from an agency standpoint or industry standpoint, it's also important for companies to then move with their user base and align themselves with these socially conscious content and drive home the fact that they are aligned with their user base as it becomes more of a relevant and important thing to their user base as a whole.
Got it. Yes.
Yeah.
I all I can say to that, values really matter more than ever,
Yeah.
probably. What going into the rest of the year, what are you both optimistic about?
Well, Dan, you and I had touched on this very briefly, prior to recording today, but Apple has sent just absolute shockwaves throughout the industry with their recent announcement about the iOS 14 update, that will be coming later this year. For those who might not be familiar, the biggest part of this update that has really just gotten people in the industry in a frenzy is that with this update, iOS users will, have to explicitly opt in to having their device being tracked for advertising purposes, and that this opt-in will have to happen on an app-by-app basis. And this is really turning, our world upside down, particularly in regards to measurement and tracking, right? And just a big question is, what does this exactly mean for iOS app programs moving forward? And I think it's still early, right? Like people, the big players in the space, like we're all still trying to figure out how exactly we're going to pivot. But I'm optimistic that, as sort of scary and challenging and disruptive as this, announcement, makes us feel, we're an industry chock full of just brilliant, innovative minds, and I'm definitely optimistic that we will be able to pivot and we'll be able to move forward in a way that does not just obliterate iOS app programs moving forward.
I would say too, this is definitely a hard question, right? You think about how wild this year's been, and you think into the second half, and you see optimistic, and I feel like a lot of people aren't necessarily in that mindset. But I think there's some really good call outs. I think just one, the higher rates of engagement for the industry as far as social media. There's been a lot more emphasis on it, a lot more traffic coming through. And I think further along that point too, the fact that advertisers are having to focus a lot more on a kind of, I would say, like benevolent content, content that aligns again with this virtue signaling, again with these values of their user base. I feel like it brings marketing as a whole, digital marketing into more of a positive light. It allows advertisers to also make impact along with their campaigns, as well as being successful. So that's something I'm optimistic for. I'm optimistic to see where that trend goes, and if we can stay more on this connection to the user base, as well as continuing to be successful on these platforms.
Yeah, I really wanted to ask this question because I think it's so easy to get caught up. I think we all need some motivation to be optimistic and positive. Jack, earlier you talked a little bit about the guidance you had gotten from a CMO that you had
Yeah.
worked with. You know, would you both say, in that vein of optimism and innovation, this might be a leading
Mhm.
question, but do you feel like it's still a good time to be a marketer, or to get into marketing and growth as a career?
Yeah, I think it's a great time. As far as digital marketing, I think you couldn't come in at a better time in any point of history. I think one of the great things about digital marketing, you can have that formal background, you can get your business degree, or if you just want to start your own business and you want to learn the basics of it, there is so much information. There's so many tools. There's so many classes you can take online that are free, and really learn the basis of how to drive growth, how to drive revenue, and acquisition for whatever you're trying to do. So I think I think there's never been a better time to get into digital marketing. But if you want to make the sole reason of your life, like your career is like at least half your life, you should have some passion for it too.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that the industry it's still relatively new, and it definitely is ever evolving. And if you're getting into like growth marketing, and you want something that really keeps you on your toes and never gets boring because
Mhm.
things are always changing. I definitely say go for it. There's always going to be a need for new minds to come in and to innovate. And I would say, yeah, I agree with Jack. It really is just there is no better time to
Mhm.
try to explore that.
I definitely hear that. I can say, having been in this a long time, I'm not going to say how many years, but I think I've never seen it as um, as as evolving rapidly as it is right
Mhm.
now. Uh, so we always love to wrap this up with a question we ask all our guests, which is, going back to the name of the podcast, Out of the Box. What is the most out of the box marketing you've ever done, or as a team personally, or that you've kind of seen done within an organization?
Okay, well, I mentioned TikTok just a couple moments ago. The one that comes to mind for me is Elf Cosmetics hashtag Eyes Lips Face TikTok campaign. Um, Dan, if you're not familiar, Elf Cosmetics they produced like an original song or jingle or whatever you want to call it, like specifically for this TikTok campaign that they launched. And it was, a hashtag challenge sort of thing. So it was just absolutely insane the amount of just like user engagement they were able to drive by making this very viral, very like easily spreadable and like popular sound and a trend on TikTok, which is quite a relatively new and still like adapting social platform for many people. I just thought it was so awesome what they were able to do with that. They were the first like big brand that I had heard of really seeing large scale success with TikTok ads. So that's the one that comes to mind for me. I think they really hit it home on all fronts.
Yeah, I think for me, this happened about I want to say like a few years ago, but it's just always been such a such an amazing example in my mind of just like benevolent marketing and then how you can shift that into actually driving conversions. So Domino's ran a campaign called Paving for Pizza a few years ago. They started it, and I believe they're still continuing it. But essentially, what they're doing is devoting some type of budgeting from the marketing and from the company to go into these communities that have really bad pothole problems. And just really bad road work, all in all, and infrastructure. And what they're doing is they're actually paying for these potholes to get filled with asphalt, and then they're putting branding over the top of it. And I think the brilliant part about it is it's not just Domino's come buy a pizza, right? One of the things they had was "Yes, we did," and it's literally just the Domino's logo with the domino. And I think it's brilliant because you look it up after, and they actually set up an amazing website with really good UX, really good CRO too. They tie it to their product. They showcase what the pizza looks like in a box in the back of a car, and you can toggle between the different road conditions. So they they bring it back to like, we paved this out as a way to, like, showcase what our product can do, tying you into pizza. And at the very end, they have an order now CTA showcasing a pizza. So I just think it's like, all in all, they're connecting themselves to the user base. They're connecting themselves to the communities and those local communities, doing some good. And they're also setting up a brilliant way for just brand recognition. And then even further, making that multi-touch, ending it with a really good UX experience and tying their product to the service they did. So that's just one of the most like out of box, brilliant marketing ideas I've seen in a little while, I think.
I mean, those are both amazing, and it just goes to show I'm not familiar with either of those. Although I'll say I'm not on TikTok, so maybe that's my excuse for the health one. So that's all for this week. Ashley, Jack, thank you so much for your time. Great speaking with you. And we'll be in touch. Speak soon.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it, Dan.